Okay, so welcome to ByteAction, Hanin. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Thomas.
Yeah, so obviously we spoke, I think for the first time properly last week, and yeah, thanks for obviously taking the time to chat again. Looking forward to learning from you about marketing in games, and yeah, I hope it's going to be a productive conversation. So, I guess first question: are you excited to go to Pocket Gamer in June? I saw that you're giving a talk um, in
Yes,
in
uh,
Barcelona.
absolutely. I'm super glad. This is not the first time I speak at Pocket Gamer events,
Hmm.
and if I'm not speaking, I usually try to attend them. And I say them because I've been like to several ones around the globe. So this is pretty nice, and it's getting bigger every time, and I would say even more productive for us, like professionals of the industry. It's one of the main events now, especially when it comes to mobile, the main event. So it's always super exciting, and the talks are really interesting. And every time you learn something new, so it's very valuable. I'm super excited.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure I'll attend your talk as well. And generally, I think Barcelona needs more events like this. So I'm excited that it's going to be happening this year. I mean, look, so from my side, I wanted to learn a little bit more um, about you, your background, sort of what brought you into games, and just generally, pick your brains on the expertise when it comes to marketing and game development in general. So I think just to start with, look, what brought you to the games industry in general? What was your maybe like first role in games, or um, yeah, how did you end up
Yeah.
in the industry?
So gaming actually I was something that entered pretty early in my career. So as a very fresh graduate, I was looking for my first job, and back then I didn't think at all about, like, gaming was not part of the scope I had, or I would say like the options I thought I had back then. Because I grew up in France, and I graduated from a French business school. And at school, like, usually the companies that were advertised to us, or let's say that most students would join, would be companies maybe more in like consumer goods, or like consulting services. So very like big corporations, I would say. And I back then I didn't think gaming was actually like this big of an industry. And so in my research I came across this job position that was back then at Gameloft. It was international product manager.
Hmm.
So you would be I was in charge of a portfolio of mobile games. And mobile back then was pre-smartphone, so it was
Wow.
another, like, a different type of work that makes me feel a bit old. uh, it was pre-smartphone, so this was like the first time I had a real experience in the gaming market, and more specifically mobile gaming market. And I actually really enjoyed my time as a first experience. I didn't think you could have so much fun marketing a product. And this is when I thought, entertainment is more my style and fits better my personality than any other industry back then. So I always tried to have a foot in the entertainment industry, and it started with gaming. Yeah.
And when it comes to marketing back in the day, what would you call marketing? How would you market the product? How would you go about doing that?
So back then, our responsibilities. So because it was pre-smartphone, there were a lot of like different platforms to distribute the games. And so our role as marketers was first to prepare the full packaging for each of the games and adapt it to each of the platforms, which represented by itself already a lot of work. But yeah, creating the packaging, and the brand around the
Mm-hmm.
game was a big part of my responsibility. Um, it would also have to, like, for example, we would be in charge if the game was a licensed game, we would be in charge of like relationships with the licensor, and we would also be in charge of the go-to-market strategy. I would say back then it was like our main focus. So a lot of branding and some go-to-market strategy, but back then there was like no tracking, or it was very much branding and awareness. It's not what the job is today, right? Where the industry shifted a lot, obviously, and now we're using tools that did not exist back then. So it was a bit different, more into traditional marketing, I would say. And likewise, it was back in the early, it was back in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Like even digital marketing was, just starting as well. So things were really different back then, different from what they are today. Yeah.
And do you remember yourself where you were when it all shifted? When we started getting apps and smartphones and development of the first actual games, how we know them today. Like, what was the reaction internally, um, and how everything transformed?
So back when the App Store launched, and the iPhone gained like got market penetration and got a lot of brand awareness and adoption. I had then left Gameloft, but I know
Mm-hmm.
that their business model and the whole internal organization shifted because the market shifted itself with the appearance of smartphones, and the possibilities, right, of the product, like what you could create, was much more powerful and much more interesting, even from a game development perspective, than it
Mm-hmm.
was before. But when it started developing, I was then working at a company that had several products, but that also had mobile apps. And so I got to really witness like the things we used to implement, or the tracking we had access to, was very much limited. And little by little, some tools appeared on the market, right? Whether it's tracking or even meta ads, all of this. I
Sure.
was actually in my market job back then, and we were adapting on the go. So getting also ourselves professionals as the industry was evolving. So I have always been like first a spectator, right, but also an actor, because you are in an industry that is, or in a market that is actually evolving and evolving drastically with big disruptions. And so you have, and also that is led, I would say, by like two main companies. So whatever decision Apple or Google implements also impacts our jobs like a lot. So by being in charge of mobile apps and games, yeah, I was able to just learn on the go, and as the tools were getting more and more professional.
And so at some point, then you joined Ubisoft, which was sort of like a defining career moment for you. You know, you spent a long time in there. Tell me about Ubisoft back in, was it 2014? When did you join them? Um,
So when I joined Ubisoft, it was back in 2016.
mhm.
And Ubisoft had always been, on my radar as a company like I wanted to join, because back at Gameloft, I remember having conversations with my colleagues, and some of them were working directly on games that were licensed by Ubisoft.
Sure.
I don't know, but if you know, it's pretty public. Like the founders of each company are brothers, so there was a lot of joint ventures, right? And Gameloft back then was in charge of the Ubisoft licenses for mobile, which changed afterwards.
Hmm.
But back then, that was it. And so the feedback that I got from working with Ubisoft was super positive, and so it kept, I kept that in the back of my mind. So when the opportunity opened here in Barcelona, I realized first that Ubisoft had moved also into mobile games, and there was this very interesting job opening, which was um, marketing director. So the responsibility was to build the marketing department, like a functional marketing department, really embedded in the studio, and to support the different production teams that were in the studio, support the product that we're developing, right? So from a branding perspective, actually the whole life cycle, from the branding perspective, building a brand, having the soft launch strategy, the go-to-market strategy, marketing budget, and yeah, the marketing mix basically, and everything that happened after, which is live ops, community engagement, etc. So when I did see it was the scope of the position, that was something for me like very interesting, and this is why I spent so long at Ubisoft. I would say because of the scope of what I was doing back then, the responsibilities and the freedom as well that we had, because of the way Ubisoft functions. The studios are pretty independent, and they own their products, including the marketing and the sales aspect of things. So that seemed like a very nice opportunity for me. It was a no-brainer. And so I applied, and I'm very happy I got the job. And I would say we had like 18 months before the first launch. So to build, the full team, and also to build the strategy, the marketing strategy to support our first launch. And it was an amazing experience, I would say, of course, from a professional perspective, but also
Sure.
from a human perspective. Launching a game, together with a production team after having worked for months together, and seeing your brand across all, like, featured across the stores, and even like influencers talking about your game. That is pretty thrilling.
Yeah,
Uh,
you see the full circle moment, no? Just from
exactly. But then
brainstorming
you
somewhere
also
in the
know,
room about what you want to build and then seeing it all. Um,
like, come to
well,
life, no, or being at least public and released, and also like getting traction.
mhm.
So seeing this was amazing. But then you also know it's the beginning, because in mobile, like, launch is very important, but it's the beginning, and then we want to be able to to keep the community that we've built and to grow it over time. So we also know, like, it's a stepping point. It's a very important moment, but then it's also the beginning of another, I would say, series of responsibilities, that come keeping the game live, keeping content on the community, also keeping the relationship with the stores to make sure, we are featured on a regular basis. So all of this, or finding tricks even, like, to increase our probability of being featured, working with influencers also to maintain the relationship, or even like coming up with new types of content that we
Mhm.
can create around the brand. So we know it's also a beginning, but I would say, like, living all the different milestones of a mobile game project was like really interesting. And I stayed this long because I wanted to see all of the different stages, and experiment the different stages, and also adapt the marketing service to the different stages of the production.
Mhm.
So that was also super interesting. I mean, I've learned. I would say this was the experience where I've learned the most, from a management perspective. Also from a branding perspective, and how you position your product, how do you build a community, how do you also engage content creators that will help you, get the word across, and get better awareness for your game. All of this I was able to experiment, and
Mhm.
to fail, and to learn, and to adapt the strategy. And I have to say it's great, because up to today, we still the Barcelona marketing team still owns a few records, such as best first month in revenue, for example. So we do have, like, some achievements to show that the work that we did, like, really worked, right? So this is also, like, we had very proud moments together,
Wow.
and yeah, it was an amazing experience overall.
So, community development or community building, I think it's one of those aspects that's so important, and I think that's so difficult to get right as well. Sometimes, how early do you need to start building a community, and how do you build a community
Yeah, I
properly?
would say, yeah, you can start as early as possible, would be the best. So I would say as early as, for example, you have a prototype that is playable, that you have,
Hmm.
like, a product that can be presented at least to an audience of people who are used to playing beta games, right? So something that you think that is good enough to be played and get feedback on. So you can
Hmm.
already start, building this little community of people that will start bonding with your brand, right? So for us, it came pretty early on. Like, whenever we had something playable, we would start testing. And by testing, we would also have something inside our prototype or inside our game to get this community of testers into somewhere else where we can, I would say, entertain them, but engage with them. And using, like, because also we have a like how do you say, we want people to feel like they can participate early on into building as well the brand and the game, right?
Hmm.
So that they feel really engaged with our brand, and that will help us further down the line. I mean, this is how we got, for example, um, people who got really like into our games, and then later on became moderators for our Discord, or helped us create content for our social media, or were very present when we needed testers. So it's like this, it's always starts like this, like the small community, but then this community will talk to their communities, right? And then you get the multiple effects. And the ideally, like in the perfect scenario, when you launch your game, you already want to have a community of players where
Sure.
you know that can also like relay the information across all their media as well. So I would say as early as you can, start building a relationship with your first testers, the people that are curious about your brand. I mean,
Hmm.
however you are acquiring them at first, and it can be also the network of your developers. I mean, it can start with friends, etc., but you want to expand as soon as possible and get them to participate, to co-create the game. And it can be very easy, like A/B testing inside this community, for example, two different logos. I'm talking from a marketing perspective, or maybe, I don't know, a main character, the concept art of two characters, and have them choose. Whatever it takes to make them feel engaged with your brand will be helpful, super helpful down the line always.
And for you, obviously the project that you worked on, that at least from doing research on you, was that really succeeded when you were at Ubisoft, was Hungry Shark was one of them, right? And then you worked on Might and Magic,
Yes.
right?
So back in 2018, we were in charge of three games back then. Hungry Shark, but Hungry Shark was not, it was a legacy. I
Hmm.
would say it wasn't developed by our studio back then, but we did take on over the live ops of the game.
Okay.
And it was also like pretty intense because it's one of the biggest community
Hmm.
at Ubisoft, of Ubisoft. So it's quite intense when it came to anything that had to do with our community and social media presence. But we were also putting a lot of effort in maintaining the app stores, in different countries, and making sure we were focused on app store optimization. So it was a legacy. We inherited this game, and our responsibility was to make sure we maintained, the level of communication and everything that was built by the team before us. And we also expanded and increased the community by putting extra efforts. So Hungry Shark was, I would say, a specific type of project for
Hmm.
us in Barcelona. But in 2018, we had two launches. So Hungry Dragon, which is a
Hmm.
spin-off
Hmm.
of Hungry Shark, but with dragons.
That's cool.
So that was one of the games. So it's a casual eat them all type of game for everyone. Pretty fun to play. So casual, cartoon style game with dragons. And then the same year, we also launched Might and Magic Elemental Guardians. So it was the first mobile adaptation of the Might and Magic IP, which is a Ubisoft IP,
Hmm.
PC originally. And so this game was, yes, an RPG, like squad type. You would build your team and improve their skills, and then go
Hmm.
attack waves of enemies. So it was super interesting because from an audience perspective, and therefore a marketing strategy perspective, it was two different like projects completely. And what we implemented as well, like the marketing mix, or even the choices we made on how we had to spread the budget, was different because the target audience was different. So it was very interesting, even for my team. We had a variety. It was very different to work on each of those three projects. And then later on, we worked on two other projects. One of them Unfortunately, we never got to launch, and the other was launched, but I had left the company by then,
Hmm.
and it's the a licensed game with a big IP. Yes.
Sure. How early do you need to define the target audience as well? Does it come up
So the
normally in the
target,
conversations in the beginning, or is it during the creative process that you?
so it's usually, I would say, very early on, because the earlier you know that which audience you're targeting, and the earlier you have your persona, the better decisions you're going to make for your product. So it's true that this is something like I would say, the support a marketing department can give within a gaming studio, for example, is definitely like crucial. I would say at the beginning of a
Mhm.
project, at concept stage, because if you want to, for example, I don't know, develop an RPG, first thing the marketing team will take a look at like what's already existing, right? And will help you uh, define if there's a market opportunity, or maybe find a market opportunity by finding a differentiator, right? So it's very
Sure.
important, like at the very beginning, when you're targeting an audience, a specific audience, or if you have an idea of a specific type of product, then you want to make sure you do your research first, to see first the competition, what already exists, what will make your
Mhm.
game different, right? And what type of audience are you targeting? Because you need to know what their needs are and their expectations, because you want to deliver something that will match their needs, right? If you want down the line to make sure your game is a success, then I call it the inception. No, you want to go back at the very beginning and say, okay, who is the player that I'm targeting? Where do they hang out online?
Mhm.
How do they communicate? Who are they? Right? So I can provide a product that fits their needs, their expectations, their standards, their habits, and offer something new, so that I'm not like all these other competitors. So what I call product marketing, right? It's decisions you will make on your product based on your audience. It's like super important. And I would put like this thing first. And once you have like some hypothesis, you can, even before starting developing anything, you can already test on the market. We can very easily like set a UA campaign, for example,
Mhm.
targeting your target audience, and testing some concepts and see, like with very early stage, click through rate, for example, get some indications, or if there's potential or not for the concept that you've worked on. So I'd say it's a collaboration between the marketing department and the head of product, or the product manager, or the producer, right? The production team, creative director. I mean, it's usually a group of people that work together in order to make sure that you are targeting, this specific target audience, offering this specific product,
Mhm.
right? So that it's a match, and then your game has more prob probability of being a
Oh,
success
yeah.
later down the line, because you will make decisions based on the audience, right? Yeah.
And that's so important, no? Because yeah, you can be launching, you can invest so much money into something, spend years building it, and then you launch it, and it's not a success. So it's just so much better to yeah invest something in the beginning a little bit less, and then test it out and see whether it works. I guess it's easier to do it when you're building a mobile game. I mean, if you're building like a PC or console game that takes years to develop, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit difficult to predict what the market is going to look like 2 years or 3 years or 4 years down the line. No?
No, that's true. And I mean, you have to be attentive, yeah, not only to the evolution of the market, but what other games are launching as well that could
Mm.
be potential competitors, and the usage that your target audience has, right? Maybe there are things that are evolving in the way they use things. Maybe there's a new platform that has launched that is, getting traction. You have to be aware and to be able to adapt, but that's also the like part of the research that you do while you are developing. You need to have like market intelligence and make sure you are aware of those movements, right? So this is super important. And I would say, like, even before developing anything or going into development, I would dedicate some time, into the concept phase, into like, okay, let's build some hypothesis of what we think would be a good game or a very good game today, and then test the concepts again before developing anything. There are ways you can test concepts or hypothesis on the market using on your target audience before developing anything. So for me as a marketer, and I think, yeah, all marketers would agree, we do, this is what we do basically. We have a hypothesis. Okay, this is my target audience. I believe that this visual, for example, will work great in my UA campaign. I go to the market and I test. I get results. I make decisions. So I would say in the production phase is the same, but maybe we start testing a bit too late, right? Once we have a
Right.
prototype, we can test beforehand. We can create a fake video of a gameplay, for example, and we can create this same video of gameplay skinned differently, and maybe that gives us hint before we decide, to go with this like art style. This is just a quick example, but you can create fake stuff, and today with AI even more so, right? It's even more accessible.
Sure.
But there are things you can
Absolutely.
create and test on the market, because of course we are all professionals working together. We have our experience, but sometimes we are not the targeted audience ourselves, so we don't know. We have hypotheses, right? But then the target audience will tell you what they prefer. So I would test, and we have hypotheses. Let's test before we start developing anything. Let's test. We say, okay, maybe I want to develop a 3 versus 3 real time PvP. Great. On this target audience, great. Okay, let's create a fake video and test. Are they clicking? Is there interest? Is there a specific art style that is more interesting? I can test, for example, a video that is played portrait versus landscape. Is there a difference? So there are many answers that we can get from market test without having to develop anything.
And I guess, if you don't test enough, and then if you kind of halfway down the line of development process, and if you invested already so much money into it, and you realize that it's not working, it's just so much more difficult to walk away from something, even if it's not working, because you already invested so much time and money into it. Have you been in these situations where like companies had to pivot?
Yes.
And how do those conversations look like, and how do those situations look like?
No, as you said, it's a painful situation, of course. I mean, and for all of us, when you dedicate, a lot of time on a project and you do believe in it, but then the market tells you that, this is
Yeah,
not the right way to go. It's quite difficult for as a team. It's not easy. Usually, we allow ourselves a few times, like a few other chances, let's say, of like making changes, going back to the market and see if the KPIs we are seeing indeed do match the ones that we had set as objectives, right? And then at some point we have to make a decision, like to kill the game. So, but before we decide to kill the game, there are different steps. We allow ourselves like still a few more trials before we come to
sure.
that decision. For us, it happened once, and we had spent quite a few months already, I would say, working on the game. Um, but I would say it's still a smart decision, because the market is already telling you that it's you will have to either put a lot of budget for the game, to be able to be profitable, and you're not even sure. But yeah, it's all a matter also of like your P&L and how it looks like, and if you cannot reach a specific level of retention, for example, then the whole project is not profitable. So in gaming, it's hard, because I think it's like such an artistic, product. You do put your heart and soul into it. You get really attached to the product, and it's something that takes a lot of your time for a long period of time, right? So you do get attached. It's really not easy, but I say in the long term, it helps, and you have to learn, right, to be able to improve on the next time. So it's a tough decision. It's also linked, I think, to I think it's the sunk cost fallacy. When you do put some time into something, it's harder to let go.
Sure, of course.
But
With
sometimes it
everything.
ends up hurting you more, not to let go. Uh, so it's complicated. But I would say on the long term, it's important that, yeah, our projects are profitable. We want to maintain, also the team. So if the game early stages and with more than one trial does not reach the objectives, the game KPI objectives that you've set, um, I would pivot into something else, and maybe this time, yeah, test earlier on, right? So you can get some indicators and do some changes already before the game is too advanced
Hmm.
and too developed, and you've already put so much effort into it.
When you look back in your career, is there like a defining moment or a breakthrough moment, maybe a game that you worked on or a project that you were a part of that taught you a lot and made you think that okay, like marketing is me, this is my career, this is where I want to be. I don't know. There's something that you maybe can think about.
Yes, so I would say marketing for me was quite natural because I'm very interested in human psychology.
Hmm.
And consumer behavior is a big part of marketing, like understanding how the human brain works as well, what we respond to, how to create like emotional experiences, even like understanding a brand as well. So I would say that it's like going into marketing was pretty came for me was pretty natural.
Hmm.
um, but then in my career, yes, it's as I mentioned earlier, no, it's like being part, like building something from scratch, basically. So for me, it's a brand, right? So it starts like by being a product without any identity, and I create like the whole story around it. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I was able to do not only at Ubisoft, but also in
Hmm.
like other moments in my career. And this is for me what's interesting is like the whole story that I build around the product. Of course, there's the also everything that is go to market, and how I market the product. But yes, it's this is for me what like when you ask me like why do I know like I'm meant to go into marketing, it's this whole like creative aspect of it that I really
Sure.
enjoy. And then I'm lucky as well because I'm very comfortable with numbers. So, for me, it's the perfect match. It matches where I'm like naturally good at or interested in. Yeah. So it has more to do with like me and my personality than
Nice.
really an
No,
experience.
it certainly
The
fits.
experiences
It
I
certainly
have just yet,
fits.
they just confirm.
Nice. And so when you left Ubisoft, so you obviously had like a fairly long career there, right? You advanced into a marketing director role. You worked on some amazing projects, and then you left and you started your own sort of personal freelancing journey, right? What was the shift like, and maybe what were the challenges, and yeah, how did you take it, so personally?
Yes, so when I left Ubisoft, it was when I felt like I've
Hmm.
learned everything that I had to learn, and I wanted like to challenge myself a little bit more and get out of my comfort zone. So I decided to become a freelancer. I'm also working on online master classes. So I'm
Hmm.
looking or thinking into going into training, and I've thought as well like B2B training because a part of what I really enjoyed doing at Ubisoft was like building the team and training the people that were on my team, as well as like of course creating a team spirit and objectives that we had, common objectives that we had together, and then achieve those objectives together. So it was
Hmm.
this whole thing of training that I really enjoyed. So I decided to become a freelancer, so to maintain, my activity as a consultant in mobile marketing. And so that comes also with challenges because you become a freelancer, then, well, you have, you're networking and trying to find clients um, yourself. So you're becoming also a salesperson for yourself. So that
Sure.
was the challenging part for me versus, the rest of my career where I was an employee within a structure.
Yeah, you have to
Okay.
think about different things, right?
Yes.
It's not just.
Yes. So it's quite interesting and challenging. So I'm keeping this as an activity. But then at the same time, yes, I wanted to diversify a little bit, take some time for myself as well, like think of what I wanted to do next. And I'm like looking as well into, you know, um, uh, teaching, sorry, about mobile growth and mobile marketing, because there are things that
Hmm.
are very specific to the mobile ecosystem. And I think today it's when you want to go into digital marketing in general, mobile is a big part of it. So I think there's, I would love to be able to transfer my knowledge. So that's why I decided to become a freelancer. I
Nice, nice.
wanted to do things differently and have new challenges and learn new things myself. Yeah, so it's very different, but also very enjoyable. Yeah.
And when you say teaching like in the university or um,
Yes, so I'm currently in contact with a few universities and looking
nice.
to teach, yeah, whether online or on site. Uh,
Nice, that's cool.
yeah.
That's cool. Okay, just going back then to working on you've worked on a variety of different projects, or from actual mobile games. I saw you worked at Coherence, which is they make like a multiplayer game engine, right? So you worked on different projects and products in the past. Like, what is the first thing that you want to understand or that you want to look at when you're starting working with a brand or a company? What are the things that you question, or aspects that you want to kind of, yeah,
So
understand in the first place?
yes, and so it's the first thing I usually try to understand is what objective my client is trying to achieve, right?
Hmm.
This is the most important thing because they usually come and they say, oh, I need marketing. Sometimes it's very clear, like very straight to the point. I want to launch campaigns. Okay, this is very clear. But some other times it's not that clear, right? Or they don't know what to do from a marketing perspective. So they come and they say, okay, for example, I need awareness, but I have no idea on what to do
Hmm.
first. I have a little budget, but I have no idea on how to spend it. I basically I don't know what to do in marketing, and I need someone to come and kind of guide me. So it's like guidance first, I would say, from a strategic perspective,
Hmm.
and then it's also like either operational implementation. So I would do it myself, or please, can you teach me how to do it? So that also comes a lot. So I would say like the services I provide, I always try to find the objectives, of course. What objectives does my client have,
Sure.
and then adapt the way I will accompany them depending on the objectives. So, for example, I've coached a lot of solopreneurs into how to launch a structured campaign on Meta to
Hmm.
answer questions they have about their audience, for example. So, I help them like through the process and I show them how to do it so that later on they can launch campaigns themselves. They understand the concept. So it's in between consultancy and coaching, I would say. And that happens like this is a service that I'm selling more and more,
Hmm.
which I love as well, because for me, it's in between the two. And then, yeah, other clients will approach me for like consultancy services. So again, strategic coherence was that case, for example. It was more from a strategic perspective. So to scale up, there's this very technical product, and the objective was to get awareness, right? So I built
Right.
a whole marketing plan, and then I would prioritize with the client and implement myself. Other times, as I mentioned, no, it will be very straight to the point. I need someone to create meta ads for me and to manage the campaigns, which I also do. So it varies a lot. But the first thing I start doing is have a conversation with my
Of
client
course.
and really understand what it is that they are trying to achieve so that I can adapt, my service and we can reach the objectives together. Mm.
Of course. And when it comes to marketing actual mobile games, because you worked a lot in that field, and I feel like nowadays there is so much content to choose from. There are so many games to choose from. Like, how do you differentiate yourself? So obviously, we touched upon the community aspect, that it's important to build a community around it and to test the game in the beginning. But once you launch it, it feels like you need to put so much money behind it. That's at least my understanding. Is that the case? Or are there like different techniques that maybe you can use to be successful? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are many techniques you can use. I know most of well, in my experience, and especially when it comes to big studios, that can there's a
Hmm.
lot of money that is injected into user acquisition. But for me, it's like what I would do is like take a smaller budget and test different channels, right? And not wait until worldwide launch to do it, but you can start testing earlier on
Hmm.
different channels and see which ones are the ones that are the best for your game or your product. For example, I don't know, like influencers is something that is very interesting and has developed, throughout the gaming industry. I mean, as an acquisition lever. Uh, all you have to do is like take a small part of your budget and test, right? Do small tests. Again, I'm a big part of like I have hypotheses, right? Different hypotheses of what we can do, budget it, and see how much it would take to do a small test, and then test. And then you can compare different types of marketing activations and see which ones bring you the best results, right? So by testing again, like in any other areas of marketing, but by testing the different levers with a small budget, you will be able to identify the things that work better. So that's from a paid perspective, and if you have a budget. But when you don't have a budget, first thing, and this is something that some developers don't do, but it's very important, is the organic acquisition. So if you are a mobile game, for example, is working on your app store pages, right? This is like very important, and there are some things that you can do for free because it's just about understanding how the algorithm works that can bring in traffic to your pages and therefore
Sure.
to your game. So I would focus on like what can I do organically already. So organically means for me means decisions on product, right? Because the way I differentiate on the market is the decisions I make when I create my product, right? For example, if I create I don't know if I'm creating a shampoo and I create this specific scent that doesn't exist in the market, this is a product decision that will make me different once I launch the product, right? So it's the same in gaming. Like product decisions for me are things that can be done organically, doesn't need a
Hmm.
marketing budget, that can impact the marketing later on, the your marketing efforts. And everything that has to do with either SEO or App Store optimization is also a very big leverage to gain traffic. Should be the first effort.
And is there like common mistakes that companies make when they're trying to market their products? And what would those be? Anything that you maybe noticed recently that
So
people
in the
focus too
gaming, I
much
know.
on? Yeah.
Yeah, I know in the gaming industry, for example, there has been a wave and still ongoing of the fake ads,
Hmm.
or shocking ads, like so that you imprint in people's brain when seeing the ad. I don't know if that serves your brand on the long run. Um, I mean, this is something that is always a debate in the industry. Should I use fake ads to gain traffic? But again, fake ads might bring in more clicks, but at the end, what you want to make sure of is keep a good conversion rate on your page, so that the traffic you're bringing is actually of good quality. Um,
Sure.
so I think this is something maybe that I wouldn't recommend from a branding perspective. And something else that I've noticed is more like maybe not so much in gaming, but sometimes, but maybe in non-gaming on mobile is the lack of identity, right? So
Hmm.
again, it also touches the brand side of things, and especially today, like with like all this AI based apps that are coming out, there's a lack of identity and personality, so lack of branding, and it ends up of being a lot of like generic looking AI apps, which me as a
Sure.
user, like I don't know which one to choose from because they all look alike, and I don't know, which one is better for me. So I would say, yeah, it has to do with branding in general. Like build a brand that your users will remember, your players will remember, or that they will engage with. And if your game feels too generic, then it will be harder to acquire, but also to engage with your players.
And I think that's kind of like a commonality between the mobile games and both PC and console games. Like regardless of the platform, that brand creating a brand that resonates with your players is super important, and will help you definitely in the long run.
Absolutely.
What would you say are like main differences between if you want to market a PC or a console game and if you want to market a mobile game?
I think it's quite different. For example, like it's just the business model is different
Hmm.
usually. So you have, I would say, like freemium versus premium, which is when you pay it like a console game, for example.
Hmm.
You pay upfront, right, before you get the experience. In mobile, the freemium model, the free to play, you get the experience for free, right? So the way, like the whole, I would say the whole mindset is a bit different. And as I mentioned, from a marketing perspective, when you market like a console game with a hard launch date, a lot of the effort will be built before and on the day of the launch. But then the work will be keeping the community engaged and most probably some customer support, um, but will be very minimized versus what you've done before. In mobile, you do this big push before launch, but then you want to keep like it's vital for us to keep the community engaged, not just from a branding perspective, but
Hmm.
because our revenue model relies on the monthly active users that we have, right? And because the conversion from free to paid is very, very small. So if we want to be profitable, we need to make sure the people that are playing the game are as many as possible, but that they also stay and stay within our game over the long term. So I would say it's a different mindset, different challenge, and for us from a marketing perspective, a different um, effort. There's a
Sure.
lot of effort that has also been put after the game is launched to keep this community right engaged. Not only marketing, production, of course, as well. And so the rhythm is like very uh, how do you say um, dependent on the updates that we release, right? And if we want to keep the community engaged, we need to release updates, free updates on a regular basis, etc. So the rhythm and the mindset and the services provided, I think, differ a little bit, and that's just from like a high level perspective. And when you look into the way to market or the go to market strategy, there are also a few tiny differences.
Hmm.
For example, when it comes to organic, of course, the SEO for a game, for example, that is sold on Steam doesn't follow the same rules as the App Store optimization in the App Store. So there are a few things that are different, and there are things that work in common. If I want to do an influencer campaign, for example, this is accessible to me as a mobile game or as a PC game or a console game as well. But I'm no expert. I have to say my expertise is mobile first and
Of
mobile
course.
only. No experts in Steam and console, but those are the things that I see from a high level perspective.